Operations here at the Adler Group and producer of all our shows, so we welcome you here. This was kind of a spontaneous program. Most of our programs are, we plan them out at least a month or 2 months ahead and get other speakers in here. So, but we do have a series of webcasts you might want to check out. This is a little bit unusual, and the purpose of this program is most of my work and our company's work is really geared towards companies now around the world, helping them find and hire people, both from an interviewing standpoint, a sourcing standpoint, an assessment standpoint, negotiating, all that kind of stuff. But I have a new book coming out called The Essential Guide for Hiring and Getting Hired, which not only is geared to hiring managers and recruiters, but it's also geared to candidates. Most of it, I'd say 70% of it's hiring manager, recruiter focused, but then it says, hey, if you're a candidate under these circumstances, here's what you have to do to navigate the real world of hiring. So that was the purpose. So I kind of wanted to leave this webcast open for both types of groups. So it's not necessarily awkward, but I kind of have to, we got to kind of spin around the desk here and see which desk we've been spinning around to see what audience we're talking about. So when you put the, obviously I can't read all the questions as they come in. So JJ, I'm going to ask you to kind of look at some and monitor the questions. And feel free as I go through this to ask lots of questions. I've got some content, of course. Some of the content I could talk for hours and hours on, but I'd rather just kind of give you this high-level overview and then get into it. So let me kind of describe what we do as a company, and then I'm going to get right into it. Semi-infomercial, but less on that. I've been a recruiter for, well, I used to work in a company and did pretty well, but I decided I really liked hiring people rather than making parts, which I did, automotive parts, electronic parts and stuff, and I was running a company. But when I got into recruiting, I realized that the hiring process was very similar to any business process. Unfortunately, most companies don't do it that way. They kind of do it ad hoc, and everyone does their own thing. So we created a process called performance-based hiring, which I wrote about in both my books. The point of the hand raising is feel free as I say anything to raise your hand throughout this program. Raising your hand is, you can raise it. I guess we actually see somebody raising their hand. I guess we probably can even see that in the attendance list, but it's better to put it in chat because we're probably not going to see that. We have some things happening in the future other than this. We have a sneak peek of our recruiter and hiring manager program on January 24th. So you can go to the events page on our website, which I'll show up in a second here, and sign up for that. That's no fee for that. I am going to be training a group of recruiters, a public version in Long Beach, California, February 7th. So if you're a recruiter and you'd like to find out about that, go to our website. We also have that same program online for recruiters. The next one starts, JJ, you might want to, what's the date of our next 4-part module? It starts February something or other, the first Friday in February, I guess.
Yes, February 1st.
Okay, so February 1st is our next boot camp. And then we have a hiring manager program, which is kind of strange. It's a 2-part online class. It's Tuesday, Wednesday, 29th and 30th. But if a recruiter, there's only one fee for 2 people. So a recruiter can bring a hiring manager manager can bring a recruiter. So enough of the sales stuff. The website is louadlergroup.com, info at Adler Concepts. It could be info at louadlergroup.com, but info at Adler Concepts. And we'll present that a couple of times today, so you don't feel badly about not writing it down. But here's the point of a lot of this webcast is for years and years and years and years and years, and I would suspect I'm the oldest person on this phone call. I've been in the recruiting industry since 1978. I actually did work in 2 major corporations and did extremely well in both. And I knew that experience, I never got a job because of experience. I got a job because I worked my 80 hours a week and got stuff done. So when I became a recruiter, I always took that. It's not about how much experience you have, it's about how effective you are in the work environment and the circumstances. So everything I've been doing, even when I started as a recruiter, I said, we're not going to talk about the job description. I refuse to use a job description. Let's define the work that you want done, and we'll find people who can do that work. I wasn't necessarily making it easier, I was just making it different because there are plenty of good people who can do the work who don't fit that stupid profile of a job description. And I've been writing about this for 30 years, so this is not unusual. But let me kind of get into the intellectual aspects of it, and then we'll get into the practical aspects of it. when you think about an internal promotion, people who are good who get promoted, not because they're that boss's son or something, well, that can work sometimes, but they get promoted because without a lot of experience. So they might have some experience, but the new job is, by definition, a promotion. They deliver results. They don't make excuses. They get stuff done. They learn quickly. They consistent in everything they do. They don't complain. They don't make. They just work very, very hard. That's the internal promotion, and it works fairly well. There's a bit of a stretch. You know, they got 80% of. They have 80% of the job, but they don't have 20%. So that's the promotion piece, and that's kind of like probably the right balance. 80-20. Maybe it's 75-25 or 85-15, but you have to have some experience, but you also have to have some stretch, and the experience doesn't have to be identical. It can be comparable. When you look at college entry, companies actually do a very good job of college entry for a certain group of people. It's focused on academics, the campus interview, the personality and fit. It's not as accurate as the internal promotion, but it's not too bad. And then they have people go through some kind of learning program or different stages of program, and even an intern is a tryout, a job tryout. But it's largely, if a person in a college, there's a little bit more freedom, and candidates are a little bit more flexible, so they tend to adopt easier. The experienced hire is fundamentally different, what I'll call the external, or where you hire someone with 1 or 2 or 3 years experience. Everything changes. It's not about performance. People are filtered on their skills and experience. They go, if they're technical, they're filtered on their technical by a bunch of engineers who focus only on their technical skills. Some people give them a behavioral interview, but most of them don't understand actually what it is. There's a lot of impact on whether they like you or not in the first interview. First impressions make a huge decision. More senior level executives focus on intuition, smart, intellectual, extroverted. And hiring managers frequently make decisions on how desperate they are. But the process, the internal promotion process, is actually a pretty good role model. College isn't too bad. The external is actually counterproductive. So, and I've been doing this for 30 years. I have to fight that battle as a recruiter every single day. Every day I'm focusing, hey, we're going to focus on performance, performance, performance. So this is why I believe that experience is overrated. It's not unimportant. It's just not as important as a continuous track record of performance. And that was the point of that blog post I wrote, which then a number of people said, hey, Lou, let's get on the phone and talk about it. So I just said, I'll get my 200 closest friends and get on the phone and we'll chat about it. But it starts, and I'm going to stop after this next slide and take any questions that there are, JJ. So feel free to start asking questions of what I'm talking about here. But I was talking with a company president Tuesday night. It was a client of mine from many, many years ago, a startup. Company's doing very, very well. He's looking for a division president. And he had a bunch of skills. Must have 10 years of this, must have P&L background, must have online interactive training background, whatever it was a bunch of things. I said, Don, what does the person need to do to be successful? And then I went in, I said, Don, this is what I gave a workshop with you guys when I gave it to your business group 12 years ago. This is what I said. Let me summarize it. So this is what I'm going to show now, what basically the conversation I had with this group president or corporate president the other night. I said, you can look at work itself or how the process of hiring takes place in 4 big categories. Having is what's on a person's resume. Skills, duties, responsibilities. Getting is what the person gets on the day they start. A job title, a location, a salary, and working for some company, maybe a parking spot. They get something on day 1. Having is actually the past. It's what they bring to the table. Getting is what they get on day 1. Doing is the actual work itself. And becoming is what happens if the person does the work well. But that's a function of the person, circumstances in the company, the economy. A lot of things happen as a result of that. But nonetheless, 4 buckets. I look at having as the past. Getting is day 1. Doing is year 1. Becoming is the future. When you think about how hiring is done today, just looking at those 4 factors, is that most people are screened on what they have. When candidates, in fact, this president was telling me, he's talking to all of his business associates looking for this general manager, he says the first question every single person asks, he's just trying to get referrals for people for this division president's job. He said every question these board members are telling me is, what's the compensation? What's the compensation? I said, so that all these people are filtering their network on compensation. Candidates ask that. The recruiter calls it candidates. Hey, I'm looking for the systems architect. I'm looking for, I don't know how much jobs people have, director of e-commerce. What's the compensation? What's the company? Too much focus on having and getting. Candidates are filtered out, then candidates filter themselves out, not interested. It's in Timbuktu or Toledo, not interested. But yet, when a hiring decision is made, the actual decision to accept a job or not, if the person doesn't have a desperate economic need to take it, it's, hey, is this work I want to do? Is it better than the competing alternatives that I have? Does it offer me some upside growth, and will I become something if I'm successful? The focus of the actual decision when a person doesn't have an economic or Maslowian need to take the job is always on what they're going to do in year one and what they're going to become. And yet, everybody filters himself out by the wrong criteria. So experience in my mind is this. What I want to filter on is start with think about what is this job worth, is this work I like to do and I can become better at it, or I can become, increase my opportunities and career growth opportunities. Well, if that's okay, then let's consider what I get for it, and let's consider if I have the right skills to do it. So my whole focus is you got to think backwards when you want to hire people. And candidates have to think backwards when they have to hire people. So I say the business process should be, let's define what they can do and become first. Let's advertise on that. If someone's in the game, let's talk to the person, because we might modify this stuff a little bit to meet the needs. We might modify our compensation needs on both sides of the table. But when you do it that way, you actually have the right process. And candidates, what I tell candidates is you got to recognize that this is what, this is the way it should be. Becoming, doing, getting, and having, not the having, getting, doing, becoming. So you have to recognize what's going on in the circumstance and control them at least the best way you can. So let me kind of just do this one piece so you'll see how all pieces tie, and then I'll open it up for a few questions. We advertise and phone screen on what people have and what they're going to get. Candidates ask about what they're going to get as soon as they get contacted. The acceptance criteria for people who don't have an economic need is what they're going to do and become. They don't say, oh, I'm going to get 3 more years of exactly the same skills I already have. No person ever says that unless they have an economic, and they don't care. So I'm getting back on a payroll to pay the car payment and the house mortgage. So if they don't have the economic need or they have multiple opportunities, it's which doing, which becoming offers me the best circumstances of multiple opportunities. But then we have the interview itself. And the interview is flawed because the impact of first impressions affects everybody's decision. Engineers might do it differently. Executives do it differently, but it's pretty loosey-goosey, the impact of first impressions. And then everyone interviews their own way. So this whole process is kind of squirrely. What we try to do with my company is really what we do is we just take this chart and we make it work. And it's not necessarily easy to do. We have some companies that systematically do it top down, but sometimes, hey, recruiters and recruiting managers have to do it bottoms up, one search at a time. So let me just stop there for a minute. JJ, any questions come up that seem to be relevant? Not silly questions, but relevant questions.
Yeah, actually, we've got a couple of them, Lou. From a recruiter's point of view, the thinking backwards makes a lot of sense, focusing on what they have or what they become rather than what they have. But if you're a recruiter who is searching for a job in an industry that you personally have no experience in, how can you create that compelling job ad, job description, et cetera, to focus on the becoming if you don't know that information?
Okay, so that's a good, and I'm going to kind of, if you can find a candidate question too that's comparable, JJ, while I answer that, would be good. If not, I'll come up with one for you. But
nope, I got a candidate one too.
Okay, so if you're a recruiter, first off, let me just say this. And I was just with a major company yesterday. We're training about probably 300 recruiters in this company. So, but we were talking about their European group, and they want to understand basically exactly the question. Well, how do my recruiters figure that out? I said, well, it's the hiring manager who has to tell you. And if you just look at some of my LinkedIn blog posts, particularly the one for I think it's, I don't know what I called it. If you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there. And I think it's the one with the picture of the cloud and the question mark. I believe that to be true. But I just asked the hiring manager. And I'm going to show this in a slide in a moment. I'm just going to say we will not use job descriptions. A job description is really a person description. on what the person, let's focus on what the person needs to do. So you have to ask the hiring manager. And I'll give you some examples of that in a minute. But the essence is, I asked the hiring manager, let's focus on the work the person does. How would you define B-plus level work, someone who's really probably in the top quartile of your group doing this work? What would they have to do? That's how that's done. From a candidate standpoint, JJ, what's the question? I think hopefully it's the question I'm hoping for, but I'll take anything you got.
Yeah, the question is, how does a candidate get around a skills-infested job description?
That's a whole book I wrote about that. That's the book you got to get. The quick take is you've got to, let's assume you're being interviewed. I mean, there's just so many opportunities. I mean, that's like a branch of 500 or a tree with 500 branches on it. If you're in an interview and either the recruiter or the hiring manager starts asking you dumb questions, meaning how many skills you have, you can see that they really are not a very professional interview. What I tell candidates, and we prep candidates, we actually show them step by step what they have to do, is just to ask the person. Before we get into the details of this, could you tell me a little bit about what the work you really want done in this job and how you're going to measure performance? Because what I'd like to do is give you some examples I've worked that's related to that. So the idea that you have to do is figure out what is the work. So a candidate, early in an interview, it's not about asking questions. It's about figuring out what the work is, because I'm going to contend 75% of the people interview you are going to box check you on your skills. Your goal is to, even if you have the skills, it doesn't matter. Your goal is to, hey, what is the work that needs to be done, this doing? And then your job is to give examples of work you've done that's comparable. It might not be identical, but it needs to be comparable. Now, let me just make this generic statement here, is the purpose of what I'm describing here is to get a worthy person the job he or she deserves. And from a company standpoint, to hire people who can do the work successfully. It is not meant to find people who are not capable of doing the work to get the work. I'm just trying to take the noise out of the system and the problems. So hopefully the match would be the appropriate match, not a probabilistic match, which in my mind, this is all a game of chance. What we have, if you go left to right, it's a game of chance. You go right to left, you'll actually get the right answer. So let me kind of keep on going here, JJ, and I think this will answer some of the questions, at least from the company standpoint, but also if you're a candidate, what you have to do to at least figure out what the work is. And again, I want to focus, JJ, just so, and everyone else knows this webcast, since we only have an hour, now we have 40 minutes left, is making the statement that experience is overrated. That's the purpose of the webcast, to suggest how do we get away from what I feel is to be the biggest foundational stumbling block of all time. And the problem is the job description. So I'm just going to go through, typically I've probably done it 500, maybe 1,000 more times, and we've trained probably now 20, 30,000 people, and at 20, 30,000, maybe 50,000, we've seen this chart that I'm about to show. So I got recruiters in the room, I got hiring managers in the room, been doing this essentially for 30 years, 20 years, since 1988, so whatever that is. And I always say, hey, typical job description, skills, duties, responsibilities, and experience. I said, let me just ask you a few questions. This is me, and I will let everyone kind of answer this too, and hopefully I'll see them come through in the Q&A area. So this is now I'm going to ask the question. You can use the Q&A for answering. How well, if someone has all of those skills, are they guaranteed to be successful on the job? So we can say yes or no. How well do these requirements predict on the job performance? Let me just see what the answer's coming through. We'll take it for 30 seconds. So no, no. Let's see, very little, 50-50. Yeah, they don't do a real good job. So we can stop now. We can stop, but I'm sure more will come in. So so you got to imagine I'm sitting bunch with a 50 or 100 hiring managers, recruiters in the room asking this question. They all say the same thing. It doesn't. Having the skills doesn't predict on-the-job performance. Let me ask a slightly variation of it. Have you ever met someone with fewer different skills who is a top performer? And what do you think this? That's your question. You can answer that too. Yeah, of course we have. Some people are kind of reluctant. I said, what about people get promoted? They don't have the skills. Why'd you promote the person? You didn't promote them because of the skills. You promoted them because of their ability and your belief that they could do the job because of something other than their raw skills. This is where if you hired someone internally, you look at performance. If you look outside, you look for skills. for the same job. I said, what are you talking about? Yeah, for the same job, you're looking for a marketing manager. If you know somebody who's been in that group and who's really strong, you might promote the person. From the outside, you wouldn't promote that person. You want someone who's exactly the same. You'd offer the person a lateral transfer. The internal versus external is fundamentally different. So now I ask the third obvious question here, and you don't have to answer that. Why would a top performer want this job? There are very few top performers who are willing to take a lateral transfer who are unemployed. Now, there are some good people who are unemployed that might take it for economic reasons, and that's a totally different story. But why would a top performer who's fully employed, who has multiple offers, take a lateral transfer? Unless you can contend that it's a lateral transfer for 6 months, but the future offers much more upside. Well, that's okay. That's a fair story, and I can accept that. So the idea is that if it doesn't predict performance, and there's people who can do the work who don't have the skills, why are we using the job description as a primary filter? And it doesn't attract people who have the skills because they don't want to. So you're working at I mean, literally speaking, what you're doing is you're looking for someone who has all the skills, who has an economic need to apply, and is willing to take a lateral transfer. That's why I hate posting job descriptions online. They prevent you from hiring people. They don't allow you to hire good people. And you exclude some great people who are high potential people who might have a little different mix of skills. Again, it's the wrong way for hiring. Filtering on having makes no logical sense whatsoever. And yet we do it. And there's no legal, let me make the statement, there is no legal requirement to do that. Why anybody believes there is, beyond my imagination, there is a legal requirement to put objective criteria down. That is objective criteria. But having blue socks is also objective criteria. Wearing a suit every day is objective criteria. Increasing sales by 10% in the Northeast Territory in 6 months is also objective criteria, and that's the. And we're doing a webcast with the largest law firm next month, demonstrating what I'm about to show now. So this is what I tell recruiters. The first question, for a recruiter standpoint, I said, what does the person need to do? So me as a recruiter ask the hiring manager, what does the person need to do to be successful? Let's define the work, not the person. Think about this. The job description is actually not a job description. It's a person description. This is not a job description. It's just 90% is a person. Have 5 years of this, a degree from here, this and this. Responsibilities is a job at 10,000 feet, but certainly not the definition of the work. So I ask the question, what does the person need to do to be successful? And I call it a performance-based job description or a performance profile for short. They do stuff. They're action verbs, not be responsible for, but grow sales by 10%, launch a product line, build a team, evaluate a process, prepare a plan, redesign a battery circuit, put a product spec together with manufacturing, engineering, and operations and budget. Okay, they do stuff. Now, here's a question for you. I've asked literally now 30,000 or more people, not just me personally, but all the people who work with me. We've trained people around the world now, easily 30, maybe more, but every single one has seen this slide. We always ask this question. Given the choice, who would you rather hire? Someone who has all the skills or someone who can deliver all the results? What do you think the answer is? I have one guy, and that's not true. I probably have more. I remember one guy in New Jersey 15 years ago. He couldn't make the decision. Literally, he couldn't make the decision. I can still see the building I was in. I can still see where the guy was sitting. I could see there's other 20 people in the room who knew him. He said, "Oh, Bill, make the damn decision." He couldn't have both. You could have one, and he reluctantly. I mean, he was actually sweating. It was only in a class. He was actually sweating when he said, "Oh, I don't know." He was very reluctant to make a decision. Neither here nor there. If you focus on, and every hiring manager, that's not true. 80% of hiring managers instantly say this: of course I want the results. 20%, generally the technical people, are more reluctant to do it because they are so invested in skills that they feel, oh, I got to figure out, and they call it soft skills. I said, I don't know that organizing a team to design a new product to be launched by Q2 is a soft skill. Yes, you need to have the design done, but, and then this is, I'm talking to a bunch, we talk to engineers around the world. I talk to engineers and they almost laugh. I said, you know, you're focusing only on technical skills. Is delivering products on time, within the budget, within the sales forecast, and the product launch schedule important? And they'll say, yeah. I said, well, you don't measure, do you? And they laugh. and the way engineers laugh, I don't know how they laugh, but it's definitely different. But it's interesting. So here's what I tell recruiters is you have to define that what the real job is. And here's the relationship, and I think people miss that. There's obviously a relationship between the two, but they're different. You can have the skills. Excuse me, go back one. I'm trying to get back here. You can have these skills, but not be able to do this work. On the other hand, people can do this work, but might not have the exact list of skills. So there is a relationship between these two, and this is very important. It's understanding the relationship, because they're not totally dissimilar, but they're not either the same either. Now this actually took me 10 years to figure this out. All of a sudden I was driving in 405 freeway in Southern California, and I had to smile, and I could see, and at the time when I thought of it, they didn't have PowerPoint, you couldn't move the balls like that. But the concept, I said, of course, it's so obvious. It's what you do with what you have, not what you have that counts. What the issue is that performance determines the skills you need, and there's 100% correlation. If you can prove the person can do the job and highly motivated to do it, they have exactly the right level of skills, experience, and cultural fit. That's a lot of proof there, but if you can prove they can do all of that work, they've got the exact skills. On the other hand, because skills are a function of performance. But skills don't determine performance. There's too many variables. The correlation from job description to doing the work is there's some correlation, 40, 50, 60%. So it's definitely, you do need some level of skills to do the work. And I would say with my firm that made 1,500, 1,600 placements in a 20-year period from 1978 to 1998, we actually tracked it. I would say most of the people, rarely did someone have all of the skills. Maybe 5% had the exact mix. 90% had pretty roughly, didn't have it all, but had different mix, different degrees, different places, different experiences. They had comparable skills and experiences. So I'm not saying go in with no skills or experience. It's just, it's not the driver. Focus on performance and you'll discover that people have the right level of skills. So now imagine I'm talking to a hiring manager. I want to stop in a minute and open this up again because this is the meat of what we want to talk about. This is the question I ask hiring managers. We have typically a lengthy discussion because I'm trying to convince, when we go into companies, our goal is to implement performance-based hiring. Generally speaking, the HR department and the recruiting department is really excited about it. Not excited about are the line managers because they don't want to be handheld. But I basically say if you have a performance management system, all we're doing is we're defining the performance of this candidate before you hire the candidate. Then so I'm always trying to convince managers as to why they should do it. And it's pretty logical why they should do it, but it should be systematized, but nonetheless, you still have to convince people. So then I ask this question: if we can promote people based on performance, why do we hire people based on their experience and tenure? And this is starting to soften the blow of managers to start thinking, hey, I should really think about performance. And if you're familiar with Google Oxygen, which is a report that Google came out with, they did a whole series of what drives performance and job satisfaction at Google, and they looked at a heck of a lot of survey data. And Gallup's Q12, what drives peak performance, it's always clarifying expectations up front. It's always telling people, here's the work you need to do, and let's find people who can do it and get motivated. But if you don't clarify expectations, you're really missing the mark. So the last question is, and then I'll open it up for some Q&A. So anybody's got questions, thoughts about how do you do it, how do you engage with it from a candidate perspective, recruiter, hiring manager perspective, feel free to start adding into the loop here. And here's what I ask hiring managers. And you guys could say if you're, you could answer for a hiring manager, but if you are a hiring manager, you can answer for yourself. And I ask, would you be willing to see a high potential candidate but who is light who are light on their skills and experience list? So would you just see someone who's a high performer who doesn't have exact mix of skills? And maybe you even modify the job a bit for it. Would you even be willing to do that? How many managers do you think answer yes to that question? Oh, of course, I'd love to see a high-performing person. What percent do you think would say yes? And it's surveys of groups of 20 and 50 and 100, and I was in Amsterdam and had a bunch there, and we were in Costa Rica and had a bunch there, and I was in San Jose and we had a bunch there. So around the world, what do you think most managers say when I ask that question? What percent say they would? Now, I didn't say hire. I said be willing to talk to somebody. Put percentage in. Nobody's, maybe I'm not seeing it. It's actually close to, most actually with it, I said, of course I would. That doesn't mean they're going to hire him. And I think that's part of it is, I just wanted to engage in conversation. Sometimes you can't do it. And I was talking with a VPHR yesterday for a company in the Midwest that makes die-cast components for the automotive and aerospace industry, castings and other components that are used in automobiles and airplanes and that stuff. And he was asking me, he said, Lou, our company, we're in die casting. Everybody wants people with die casting experience. And he knows what I do, so we've been talking off and on for a couple of years. I said, well, maybe you do need die. You know, if you're setting up a production line and you got to launch something in 6 months, you got to get a new die cast line up to speed, I probably would want die casting. On the other hand, if you're looking for a material control and logistics person, I probably want automotive and manufacturing and other kind of experience. I mean, similar that you certainly want manufacturing because you're dealing with raw materials and parts, but they would need specific die casting. If you're looking for a maintenance person, I'd certainly want people to work on similar kinds of equipment. It doesn't have to be identical equipment. So each job is different and the circumstances are different. But it's this absolute mentality of must have this, must have that, must have this, and even in die casting. One of the job specs must have 10 years of die casting experience. I said, I'll give you a break. A year of die casting experience plus, you know, some other automotive repair and maintenance would be more than satisfactory. So they obviously have to understand it, but why is it 10 years? And everybody has this mental block. That's why I say we do have a mental block. And I'll actually make this statement here before I open up for questions is I believe that when you focus on skills and experience, you are anti-talent. You're basically saying we don't want good people, we want average people. Because the only people who would apply for this job, if they have all the skills, are average people. If they're really good, they wouldn't want to take a lateral transfer. And I'm also going to say they're anti-diversity. This is the legal component. Is you're making your jobs just like every other job you have. It's this homogenation of the whole workforce. You need diversity here. Well, diversity is doing all this kind of work. It's not having these kinds of skills. And yes, I will not compromise on the work that needs to be done unless you have that ability to do it. But I really believe we're screening out the best people by thinking the wrong direction. So let me stop there. I think there's one or two other slides, but this was the meat of it. Thoughts, comments, or questions, JJ? Let's make this now the radio show.
Great. Yeah, we have a whole bunch of questions, both from the recruiter or hiring manager side and the candidate side. So starting with the recruiter hiring manager side, how can a recruiter or hiring manager, how can a recruiter get a hiring manager to screen for performance? Because hiring managers are reluctant to interview or hire because they're not sure how to measure past performance, but skills and years of experience are easy to identify. So how can you get around that little roadblock?
Okay, well, now you're getting into our whole class, but it's clear, obviously, you can't just say I'm going to do this without having the methodology in which to implement what you want to do. First off, the discussion I had yesterday with this major company that wants to train 300 recruiters was starting off with, and this is recruiter facing, and it's a Fortune 50 company, was we're going to define, when we take the requisition, the intake meeting, we're going to define what performance looks like. They do have a performance management system. What they normally do, though, is in the first 90 days, they create the performance objectives. So I just say, why don't we create them before? There's no extra work. We're just going to take roughly, just roughly, doesn't have to be exact, roughly the performance objectives for that job. Customize a little bit for the location, for the manager, and the other circumstances. I don't want to get into any more detail than that, but we're going to create the performance profile. Our whole methodology for interviewing is, and this is how we do it, so this is our two questions, and there's another story I have in my LinkedIn blog post, but I think it's called the shortest interview course on record. So maybe I'll give a story on how the answer is. And I was talking with this company president on Tuesday night. He didn't know how to interview. He says, Lou, what? And our whole thing was define the work and ask our two questions. That's our short course on the hiring process. So he says, what are those? This is a guy Tuesday night, and I met him 12 years ago. We've done some other work. What are those two questions, Lou? And I said, Don, before I give it to you, I'm going to give you a story. So I'll give you the real quick story. A president of a company, this is probably 15 years ago now, calls me up desperate. He says, Lou, you just spoke to our business group. What are the two questions you told us about? I said, well, what are you looking for? He said, I'm looking for a VP operations. I said, well, let's build a performance profile first. He said, I don't have time. I don't have time. So what do you mean you don't have time? I'll come out tomorrow. He said, I don't have time. And he was really desperate. I said, what are you talking about? You don't have time. He said, the candidate's in my office. I said, I see now why you don't have time. I said, okay, don't go in your office. And I had been to the guy's facility. It was a wood manufacturing company. So I said, why don't you just walk through your factory, and when you have a problem, materials, too much scrap, bad material flow, labor force is not aligned properly, and you have people not working at full productivity. I mean, you got a lot of problems with your factory. Have the person stop at some place where they can clearly see the problem, and then spend 3 to 4 minutes defining the problem. Then ask the person 2 questions. How would you figure out how to solve the problem? Don't worry about the answers. Ask them how he or she would figure out how to solve the problem, what they would look at. That'll get you insight in their thinking and understanding. And then number 2, spend more time on what have you accomplished most related to that. Spend 10 or 15 minutes on that. So 3 or 4 minutes defining the problem, 5 or 10 minutes on having the candidate tell you how they would figure out the problem, and then 15 minutes on what they've done that's most comparable. And then call me later. Well, that was it. Those are the 2 questions. You ask candidates how they would solve, hey, we have to grow sales by 10%, and you can do the order any way you want. Tell me about where you've taken a business and grown sales 10%. Tell me where you've launched a new product line and describe the product line. We got to build a team of accountants to set up a whole new international reporting system. Walk me through how you've done that. So that's what I call the anchor. You get an example of something they've done. The visualization is, well, if you got this job, how would you do it? So those are the 2 questions. So that's the methodology in which you do it. Get the manager to define the work and make sure that has a little bit more to the interview to control first impressions and scorecard it. We have all that stuff, but that's the essence of it. Long answer, but that was the essence of what we do. Another one, JJ?
Yeah, actually,
candidates?
Yeah, actually the next one is a couple of similar questions. If you are a candidate who is new in the market, or if you are in college and just getting ready to enter the market, but you have outstanding skills, outstanding ability, you're smart, you know you can do these jobs, is there something that you can do with your resume, with your job hunting techniques to overcome the skills and the kind of pat template?
Okay, I got it. Yeah, you don't have to you can ad lib it, JJ, so I got the essence of it. Yes. So let me say, the general statement is don't be the same. Be different. I saw one of the comments on one of the blog posts I did on LinkedIn. She said, I'm a world-class graphic designer, got lots of experience, but nobody wants to interview me because I'm too old. She might even be on the call. I don't know that. I said, if you're a classic world graphic designer, let me see your work. I don't need to know anything other than your work. Your work output is what I would do. So if you're really good, just send somebody your website or some examples of your work. I mean, that would be different. Or if you hear about a job, you see something listed and you really think you're good. See, the fact that you know you're good doesn't mean anything. Who cares? You got to prove it to somebody that you've done something that's worthy. Now, we have an interview methodology. We call it looking for the achiever pattern. If you're a good interviewer, you would figure that out. That's why I say if someone uses the process we recommend, everybody will get the choice. They'll hire the right person, and it will open up the pool to the right people. But unfortunately, most people don't use this kind of approach, so candidates have to fight through the process, and recruiters have to fight through the process. So what I would say is you have to be different. If I saw a job description or a job listed that was a marketing job, and I felt I could do it even though I didn't have 10 years experience, I would just do a little pretty, hey, I understand in your marketplace there's 4 competitors for your product. I went online, I found this, 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 and this. When I looked at your product description, I could see that you missed this mark, and this company actually does a better product than you do. Well, now I'm not in marketing, but I bet I could get that marketing job because I know what that job entails. I would just spend 2 hours doing it, and then I'd probably send it to the VP marketing, not the recruiter doing it. And you can find that person on LinkedIn. It's right there, VP marketing, XYZ company. So those are the things I would just do it. So if you really think you're good at it, well, why are you good? If you're a sales rep, hey, I won the East Coast Sale-a-thon by Pi Sigma Epsilon. Okay, I want to talk to you. No question I'd want to talk to you. So somehow you have to demonstrate that you're not just a run-of-the-mill candidate, and being different and being creative and using social tools to rather than follow this mindless process of applying for a job which is useless. Let's say if you don't have the skills, don't apply. I can tell you right away. Unless you're a perfect fit, don't apply because you'll get lost in the shuffle. On the other hand, and if you can demonstrate that you're exceptional in some area, go out of your way to figure, how am I exceptional? How can I prove it? Well, you probably have a website. Your Facebook page might show some pictures. My wife's an artist. She's got a website. It's got 20 of her pictures on it. People look at, yeah, she's a good artist. I mean, that's all you have. You don't have to know how many years experience, what she's done. You just look at the pictures, you know. If you're good at analytics, hey, you did this big analytics project, and I showed this, 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 and this, and all of a sudden people start seeing it. I don't know if that's enough of an answer, but it's all I got for 2 minutes, JJ. You got another one there, JJ? Hello?
Oops. Oh, I'm sorry. I was muted and talking to myself. Oh, we do, actually. And this deals with both recruiters and candidates. If you're a recruiter and facing a stack of resumes, how do you review those resumes so that you can see performance in the resume, the high-performing candidates within the resume? Is there a trick to that?
Yes. I call it the two-step, which is legal. And I don't look at them. As simple as that. What I do, and you can do this with your email system, your Gmail system, every time you get someone to respond, this is legal, actually, in the book I said I call it do the two-step, is either in the resume itself or in the ad posting itself, as I say, do not send me your resume. Instead, send me in your email write-up or your connection a very short summary of something you've accomplished that you feel is comparable to this. So in my job postings, I say, hey, I'm looking for an accounting manager to take over the implementation of the SAP Accounts Payable module. This has worldwide implications for costing, for yada, yada, yada. So I make the job, I said, if you think you're qualified for this, send me something you've written or something you've done that is most comparable to that. We'll get back to you in a day or two. So I changed the process. You can't, I mean, I just will not, what's the point of getting resumes you don't want to look at? Now, if I don't do that, the alternative is, and we have companies doing this, and I do it all the time. Whenever I get too many resumes, I put on my automatic email response, which says, you send me a resume. So if I get a resume from Travis or Jay or Stephanie, you'll get a resume back from me. Hey, great, like your background. We have a two-step process at our company. You might not remember exactly what posting this job we're looking for, but we're looking for a product manager to handle the competitive analysis of products in this industry, in this space. If you've done anything comparable, why don't you put together a half-page write-up of something you've done that's most comparable, and if there's a good fit, we'll get back to you right away. So what I call it the two-step. I make the candidate, first off, I attract the candidate by making the job compelling, and I ask for something other than the resume. If you just go through the resume, you can do it, but it's hard. I mean, so that's the third choice. When I look through a resume, I give it 10 or 15 seconds. So I mean, I generally tend to look at LinkedIn profiles, but I'm looking for what I call the achiever pattern, track record of promotions, some special recognition, someone whose position is head of where they would normally be in their skill set, some kind of recognition, either got patents or white papers, the quality of their company. I'm giving it, I mean, literally, in our class, we actually show, now this don't spend a lot of time, but how do you look at a profile and get the judgment is, hey, is this person in the top quartile or not? And if the person's in the top quartile, even if not a fit for the job, I want to talk to the person. I just have this rule, hey, if I get somebody in the top quartile, I can use them somewhere else. So it's, you got to take your blinders off as, hey, although I'm trying to fit this cost manager's job, I'm seeing some other people who are really good. I'll take a look at them. And now I'm thinking of a person who I had a search last year. I don't do a lot of search, but I do some. Search last year for division controller. And a woman, I looked at her background. She was with one of the big entertainment companies in LA. She had worked, had a CPA at PricewaterhouseCoopers. She worked for the CFO of a major entertainment company right out of PricewaterhouseCoopers. She now was promoted into director of accounting at a very young age. And she was going for an MBA. I mean, right away, it didn't take me long to figure out within 10 seconds this was a hot candidate. Too light for my job, but I wanted to talk to her for something else. She was a very impressive young woman. There's no question about it. So I don't know if that helps, but that's I just changed the process around everything. Let's take one more, JJ, and then I'll kind of summarize this, and we'll take some others as well here.
Okay, great. We've got a couple legal questions. How does this fit in a union environment, and has this been tested through the OFCCP?
Oh, yes. Let's answer the first one, or the second one first, which is the OFCCP. Yes. In fact, David Goldstein of Littler Mendelson has done a big white paper. He will, again, the OFCCP says you have to do your reporting for candidates, and OFCCP is if a company does any government work. The fact is, the two-step in particular is what I asked them to specify, and I've worked with Littler Mendelson, the two senior partners at Littler Mendelson for OFCCP, and Littler Mendelson is the #1 law firm in the country, Elizabeth Horvath in D.C. and David Goldstein in Minneapolis. They're the two senior partners for OFCCP. They both endorse what I've just said: job profile, performance profile, and the two-step. The idea is, if your process, remember, a candidate has to recognize, an internet candidate has to recognize that they are applying for a job. If your first step isn't apply immediately, but hey, we have a two-step process. The first step is you're interested in talking. The second step is hey, you have to fill in that report, the email I just said, describing something you've accomplished. If they don't respond to your email, they've basically taken themselves out of the reporting requirement. So you want to talk to, I would actually not talk to your corporate lawyers. I would actually talk to somebody who actually litigates this stuff. And Littler Mendelson is the #1 litigator for all OFCCP complaints. You can just figure that out. So it is OFCC compliant. You do have to report. Once a candidate is a candidate, an official candidate, you do have to start your reporting. On the other hand, this two-step is we don't have a job yet. Our process is you have to go through 2 steps before you're considered a candidate. Step 1 is you submit your application. Step 2 is you respond to this email. And when you don't respond to the email, you've basically withdrawn from the process. So that's the essence of it. From an OFCC, from a union standpoint, we've worked with Fisher & Phillips, which is the 3rd largest labor law firm, specifically for union. It was a little bit different because in union environments, there's union contracts that are generally tenure-based. But what this happened was Fisher & Phillips works a lot of automotive dealers. A dealer, I think it was somewhere in the Midwest, the dealership closed down and opened up across the I think it was across the river and down the street 5 miles, trying to get rid of the union. And the way they did it is they said, okay, we will bring people over who can meet the performance requirements of the job. So I can't tell you it's exactly, but the Fisher & Phillips totally endorsed this. They wanted to use it, but the only way, and that's the only circumstance I know where they actually did it. Obviously, if you have a union contract that's tenure-based, that's something you can't do. So I don't know if that helps, but there is guidance there that it can be done. You just have to kind of think a little bit creatively how to pull it off. Okay, let me kind of just, here's what a performance profile looks like for sales. I just kind of wanted to show you that. And we did it with some sales. The point is, we have the major objective up here. Within X months, achieve 50% of sales targets, and within a few months after that, make revenue and margin quotas. That's a primary objective. And then underneath that primary objective is a bunch of steps. Now, this probably took an hour the first time, but now the company does it in 15 minutes. They just change it for the sales manager and other stuff. The point is, it's a series of steps that the person needs to do. Learn the product line, conduct competitive analysis, develop X number of leads, meet with decision makers, move to the second stage, negotiate and close, provide post-contract support. For an engineer, figure out the design problem. Put together a sequence of tests that will determine the best course of design action. Build prototypes, whatever it is. People go through a sequence of steps. If someone's taken over this die casting line, it's understand the manufacturing situation, to a complete audit of every single manufacturing process, put a plan together to automate the factory in 90 days, obtain and build the resources, evaluate the team. There's a sequence of stuff that people do for almost any job. And they're not dramatically, they are different in words, but there's a process of problem solving, planning, decision making, trade-off analysis, and then execution, building the team and managing it. But work has this flow to it. So I want people who can meet that flow of the work. And that's why and if they can do that and they've done successful even in some different kind of circumstances, it's my contention that it's not about their experience, it's what they do with their experience. And that's why I say experience is not unimportant. But the track record of performance is what's more important. and they have to have enough experience to do the work. It's when they define what's enough. And when they ignore engineers, say, well, they got to have 10 years of software development, and yet they can't put together a screen that's user-friendly, or they miss a technical design target. If you got two engineers that are too brilliant, well, by the way, you can't be so brilliant. We got to get this thing done, and we're going to launch a product in July. You got to be brilliant enough to launch the product in July. That's different than having 5 years of Ruby on Rails and HTML5 experience, which I guess you can't have, but it's neither here nor there. Okay, I've got one final statement, JJ, but let's take a few questions, okay?
Okay, great. A couple questions about interviewing. From a recruiter and hiring manager standpoint, when you're in the interview, how can you interview in such a way that you can figure out if what's on the resume is real or fabricated? And then from a candidate side...
Okay, is this the same question?
No, it's just about interviewing, but let's do the first one first and do the candidate one second.
Okay, no question about, I guess I look at a resume, I've looked at, I don't know, 10,000. If you see a progression of success, person's been an accountant, accounting manager, director of accounting, controller at a company, then goes to company B and is a controller and a VP finance, and you see this logical congruity between the person's background that makes sense. That would tell me that and the person got recognized for some award that was in there. I mean, that's okay. That's the right kind of a profile. If you see titles and you see this progression, and just look at the LinkedIn profile, I could show one here. You can look at a LinkedIn profile that person's had 6 months here, 7 months here, 2 years there, took a lateral, took a bump. So you just see this thing that just looks like a bunch of gobbledygook. And then you see all these other things that sound great. Well, I'm not going to buy into it. So I guess I look for congruity around the whole profile. Did this person make logical judgments, logical decisions in moving from companies? Does there seem to be some pattern that seems logical? And then are there recognition, which to me is very important. Does this person get recognized? They're a member of Beta Gamma Sigma. They're a member of, and I just saw a profile, the Black Engineers. There is a Society of Black Engineers. The person became the president of that in a year and a half afterwards. And this is a pretty cool guy. Diverse candidate and a pretty cool person. I literally, that was a real person I saw. So just the other day in a class, we were looking at some resumes to find diverse candidates. So I guess it's the congruity of all the stuff. Does it make logical sense? And that's when I look at, when I give this 20 or 30-second review of a resume, and in one of our classes we actually show how to do that, it's really that's what I'm looking for. Is there a pattern of the right companies? Does it make logical sense, or is it a bunch of hodgepodge? Hodgepodge, I don't have time. I put the people who are congruous, even if it's not exact fit, but it looks like a good person, I got to put them in a good guy list, with a good gal list. Next question, JJ? JJ? JJ?
Sorry. Yes, I'm here, Lou, sorry. The candidate side of that is when a candidate is in an interview, how can a candidate make sure that all of their diverse talents are communicated without seeming off-putting?
Well, I guess okay, so let's assume, and I don't know what some of these weird talents are, but obviously here's a question that you have to know the answer is going to be yes to. So let's assume you're going into a company and you're interviewing for a job, an accounting job or software job, and you're really strong at manufacturing cost accounting systems, or you're really strong at HTML5, but it doesn't say that. They're talking to you about something else. You might want to say, well, I noticed that when I looked at your product catalog that this seemed to be important and this seemed to be important, and it appeared that some of your manufacturing is a little bit soft. Is getting involved in this area important as part of this job? So you have to do a little research and then ask the question, is that important? Now, you have to make sure the answer is yes to that, because you're then going to say, well, great, because that's what I thought, because I was just reading this report I saw in the local newspaper that this plant had a layoff because of this, and it was because of and then you answer the question because you've done some research. Oh, I understand that you're doing this, but I understand, boy, it seems like your mobile app isn't as strong as it could be, and maybe if we did this and this, would that be of interest there? Now, you don't say that unless you know what the answer is going to be. Or else you're sitting, oh, no, that's not the least bit interesting. Well, then goodbye, you're out of here. So I guess you got to be careful. You got to ask questions that you think you know the answer to that demonstrate that you have the skill set. So at the end of the interview, we tell candidates, hey, you have to know, this is one of the tips we tell candidates, you have to know your strengths and weaknesses inside out, mostly your strengths. And with your strengths, you got to write them down on a piece of paper. Then you got to write 3 stories for each one of those strengths that prove it. Then then in your mind, in the interview, you go through, hey, did they check off all the boxes? I'm really good at A, B, C, and D. Oh, they didn't ask me about D. So during the interview, you got to ask, hey, let me ask you this, is D important? And you better make sure it is, because then you say, well, great, because here's something I've done with that capability D. Okay, we got to stop, guys, because I want to honor it. Let me kind of just quickly summarize, and if there's a few questions, we'll try to get to them. If anyone hangs on 5 or 10 minutes, happy to do it. The big point is you got to understand the job. I don't care what side of the desk you're on, you got to ask what's the job. And managers, hiring managers are doing a disservice to the recruiters and to their company if they don't know the job. It's problematic because the person will be motivated and competent to do the work. Focus on doing it backwards. Focus on becoming and doing, not getting and having. We didn't get into the hiring formula, which is our whole course, but when I look at a person, I want to understand their motivation to do the work, their fit with the company, their potential, and then their skills. I'm measuring all of that stuff. All of them are important. Their motivation to do the work, you got to define it, their fit with the circumstances and the culture, their potential to grow, and the skills they bring in. And I'm always, and it's probably in that order. I'll give up a little on skills before I get the other stuff. But if I got all the skills but I don't have the other stuff, who cares? So that's the order: motivation, fit, potential, and then skills. I like to add an exploratory phone screen. I don't want people to become a candidate. This is not only for OFCCP, like I added this extra step for the interview, for the reporting for OFCCP. I also had an extra step on the assessment process, which is not a legal requirement. It's just I don't want people to value the wrong stuff. And when you add a phone screen, hiring managers or recruiters, all of a sudden, well, recruiters obviously do it all the time, but hiring managers should have this 30-minute phone screen, just a discussion to see if the person's a fit. We didn't get into this, and we can't. I said, candidates have to reverse engineer the process. They got to figure out, okay, is this process, the company's using the right process, or can I finagle my way through the process somehow? That's part of being creative. That's a lot of what my book is about, is getting through the process because it doesn't work. The book's going to be less than $10, so we're not talking big bucks here. For a candidate, you got to be found. I didn't talk about that, but if you don't know how recruiters are looking for candidates and you don't have that figured out, well, you're not going to be found too often. So you got to make sure your resume and LinkedIn profile are foundable. Not a good word, but we'll use it. Part of this is be different. Maybe take a temp job, take an intern job, take a contract job, prove it. Take a job for free for 2 weeks. I'll work for you for a week for free. I'll take that project. Man, I was confident in it. I had no problem doing that. In my mind, experience is overrated. That was really the point of this, and performance isn't. If you're a performer, it'll come out. But you got to demonstrate that through the interview process, when you get the job, and after that. If you're a performer, you'll be successful. If you're not a performer, you'll complain. Okay. Again, here's the stuff we've got going. Final few questions, JJ, or if anybody's got them that you think are world-class, appropriate for everybody. We have a sneak peek in 2 weeks. Feel free to kind of get into our class itself. Recruiter Boot Camp, if you can make it, February 7th. You're in LA. I think the back row is kind of filled now. There might be, in fact, that one person who wanted 2 seats, JJ, you can only give them 1 seat. I know that somebody called this morning, wanted 2 back row seats, but we only have 1 back row seat. But we audit the back row for the first 2 hours if it means no fee. Online hiring manager program next week. You will get an email. Right now, let me just leave it for any people who want to hang on and ask a few questions. Any other questions there, Jay, that just kind of stand out or so compelling we got to get to them?
Yeah, we do have a lot of recruiters on this call, actually, who are bought into the process. They're sold on the techniques, but they're dealing with hiring managers or companies that are still stuck in that experience and skills mindset. So do you have any advice on how they can help their hiring managers or companies to get past that?
Okay, so let me kind of give this story from yesterday afternoon. We're working with a company, a Fortune 50 company, got 300 recruiters, and the intake meeting was exactly what I described, and they totally bought into the concept. But then the question was, well, how do we implement the concept? So I gave story 1, which is not the story they wanted to hear, nor that anybody on this call want to hear, is we're working with a big manufacturing company in the Midwest. We're training all their managers. We're going to be training them all year, but we presented to all their division heads and all their directors and above. So it's about 100 people in a meeting in early December. And I just happened to have lunch with the CEO of the company. I said to the guy, I said, Alan, you know, this is going to be, you're going to spend a lot of money with us, and we're happy to take it. But you'll be happy to give it to us if it works. But it won't work unless you, the CEO of this company, at the end of the day tomorrow, when all these manager training are going back to their divisions around the world, you say from this moment forward, not only to get a job rec approved, they have to have a performance-based job description associated with it. That forces the process. That afternoon, he said that, and the company is rolling. I mean, they'll pay us a lot of money, but they make 3 good hires out of 1,000. They'll more than pay for themselves. However, so now I'm going back to yesterday afternoon where I was talking with this director of talent for a big company. How do you implement it? I said the way I would implement it, if you can't get buy-in at the top level, you got to go bottoms up as opposed to top down. What I would suggest is each recruiter find some manager, and 20% of the managers get it right away. I mean, this is, I just happen to have lucky because I just work with managers who got it, or else I cherry-picked assignments. So I just had a pure opportunity to do that. So what 20% of managers do get it. So find 1 or 2 of those and do the process with them. And then let them kind of be your catalyst or your early adopters to present it to other managers. So you kind of have that ripple effect. You go bottoms up. So I guess the answer for a recruiter is find a manager who's open-minded and just have this conversation with them. If you can, go to our boot camp. I mean, I know there's a fee. It's not a big fee to this thing. If you're a recruiter, bring a hiring manager to our online course. It's a couple $100. I mean, literally, it's not that much for the impact you get. It's a 2-for-1. And that was really the point, is you can't hire great people alone. You do have to do it with a hiring manager. And most of our just so you guys all recognize, our training, when I started doing this training, it was only hiring manager training. Because I was a recruiter. I didn't need to train you guys. Then about 10 years ago, I said, you know, I think I'm tired of doing recruiting. I still do it, but after you do it for 30 years, it does get tiring. I was pretty good at it. But then I started realizing, hey, now if we're going to train managers, we also got to train recruiters. That became our business as this combination of recruiters and hiring managers. And we get you guys together, recruiters and hiring managers together. It's, of course, we'll do it. I mean, if you can't believe the excitement that people go on. And they call, we get emails back, hey, it worked. But it starts by banishing job descriptions and focusing on performance. Let's end it right there, JJ. I hope this was valuable, guys. I hope to see you in the future. I hope you read the blog posts on LinkedIn. They're a lot of fun. I have the next one that's going to probably come out, the JOLTS report, which talks about labor, the forecast of what's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 months, comes out tomorrow, and I'll be writing about that as to how to reduce the unemployment rate by 2 points. Part of it is this, but there's going to be some other stuff in there you have to do too. So with that, I thank you very much, guys. Hope you have a great week and a great weekend.
Great. Thank you so much, Lou, and thanks for everyone on the call today. We were thrilled you were able to spend the last hour with us. You will be getting an email in your inbox with some of the highlights that we discussed today. And if you have any questions that we weren't able to address, feel free to send those into info@adlerconcepts.com. That's info@adlerconcepts.com. And someone will try to get back